Hi everyone, it's me. As you may know, I visited Madrid for just a few days during the FIDE Candidates 2022. I had a chance to do some sightseeing, and of course, I had a chance to play chess against the mysterious Rey Enigma, just in the center of Madrid in the fun zone of the tournament. We played 2 games. In the first game, I started the game with my favorite for blitz, the Alapin variation, and even though I misplayed the opening, I managed to outplay my opponent little by little and got a superior position, quite a winning one, I must say. And here, right now, is a crucial moment. My opponent is about to play knight c7, which actually could have lost on the spot if I would notice the winning continuation rook takes c5, then rook takes d4, and then knight takes c5 with a completely won position. Instead, I didn't notice this combination and played rook h2 e4, keeping some part of my advantage, but after b6 my opponent had a chance to stabilize, to protect the bishop on c5, and due to the f6 threat that he has, I needed to retreat my rooks. So rook e1, f6, rook e2, knight to g5, which seems to be a mistake again, giving me back a very promising position. The knight is under attack, knight h7 is another inaccuracy, f5 gaining some space, preparing bishop f4 check, and here I should have taken on c5 and play a5, getting another, once again, a winning position. Instead, I captured the knight on g5, which was a very bad decision, and ended up in quite a difficult endgame. So we can see that all black's pieces suddenly started to go forward and create some unpleasant threats. So I was back from winning to defending this position. And then, further on, I had some chances to save the game, but I did not quite use them. I should have exchanged the rooks here, for example, but for some reason I decided to keep the rooks on the board, and my opponent had a chance to protect his passed pawn. And then again here, the rook b3, I might have had a chance, but for some reason I decided to give up my a pawn, thus creating 2 passed pawns for my opponent. And I had no chances against his 2 passed pawns. They were just too strong. All I had left is just to wait and see how his king approached my rook, and thus I resigned. It was a pity to spoil such a game because of such great positions that I had, but Rey Enigma was very kind to let me play another game, to give me another chance. He said, okay, let's play another one. And I said, hooray! I can get a chance, another second chance to play one more game. And let's see what happened in this game. So this time I was playing black. The time control in the first and in the second game was 3 plus 2, meaning that we get 3 minutes for the whole game and 2 seconds of increment every time we make a move. I played the Caro-Kann defense. My opponent opted for an exchange line with knight to e5, and here he played f4, which seems to be quite a risky move. It weakens a lot of white squares in the center. After knight h6, I'm heading to f5, and well, I could be very happy with the position I got out of the opening. Here I attack the knight. I force it to go back. Knight f3. But for some reason I was over-aggressive. I was playing too aggressively here. h5 was not really necessary. I could have just simply castled and then trying to get my knight to e4. But as you will be able to see, h5 was not the only aggressive move in this game that I made. After queen b3, I continued my plan with h4, and after bishop d3, I played h3. What for, you may ask? Well, I was not quite sure, but they say that the pawn on h3 might help you at in some positions. Okay, here, however, I had a problem. I had to decide what to do with my king and with my pieces. My king is still in the center. Castling right now after h5, h4, h3 would be, well, would seem as a move in the wrong direction. So I decided to keep the king in the center. I played e6 and I moved the king to f7, keeping my rook on h8. Since I hoped to sacrifice at some point on g3 and open up the road for my h-pawn. Okay, again, some questions to decide what to do with my bishop on c8. I played b6, preparing bishop a6 at some point. After knight f1, I decided that it's time to regroup my pieces a little bit. I moved my knight to d6, queen c2, knight e7, queen to e2, taking under control the square a6, and at the same time looking at the e6 pawn, so my bishop cannot really move from c8. I played queen to d7, b3, and here I offered a pawn sacrifice by playing knight e4. Of course, my opponent didn't want to give up his light-squared bishop and didn't want to open up the long diagonal, the big diagonal, for my bishop after bishop takes e4. So he just ignored my knight on e4. He played bishop b2, protecting the pawn on c3. I played knight f5. At this point, we both have a little bit less than 2 minutes. Rook a to c1, bishop b7, finally developing this bishop. The position is quite tense, even though the computer gives a slight edge to white. Maybe even not a slight, but quite a big edge. But since my pawn on h3 is so far advanced, there are always some ideas connected with sacrifices. So after quite a long thought here, you can see that Rey Enigma made a move with only 1 minute on his clock, offering an exchange of the knights, knight 1 to d2, and I had to accept this exchange. I had to take on d2, play bishop f8, but instead, again, I opted for a very aggressive approach. I decided to sacrifice a piece for 2 pawns, which is usually not enough, but since my pawn on h3 is so far advanced and supported by the rook, I hoped that I will get some compensation. What should I say? My evaluation was not correct. In fact, this sacrifice, well, we can call it a bluff. Because White has enough possibilities to protect his position, and only the time on his clock gave me some chances to hope to complicate the position. But I played well. Okay, bishop f8, trying to transfer the bishop to d6, where it's gonna put pressure on the f4 pawn. Bishop b2, bishop d6, threatening to play g5. That's exactly what I did here, but it seems that it was a little bit earlier because I didn't evaluate correctly the brilliant move that my opponent made. After g5, unfortunately for me, there is a very strong refutation to it. Knight e5, quite a move. And bishop takes f5, and here you can see that I almost resigned. I didn't realize that bishop takes f5 was a possibility because I cannot take the bishop back because of e6. So I played rook h6, trying desperately to support my pawn on e6, but of course my position is completely lost here. It's even more lost than what I had in the first game. I was winning. Here, of course, White is winning, my opponent is winning, but again, just 10 seconds on his clock and some decisions to make. And I do have some counterplay. His king is open. If only I could do something to get rid of this queen on h2. If only I could make one more step forward. Okay, my opponent blundered an exchange, but it doesn't change the evaluation of the position. But, as you can see, I managed to play h2. My opponent was obliged to go with his king to h1. I have a rook for a knight and a bishop. And the heartless computer evaluates this position being completely lost for black. But again, plus 10 is the evaluation. What could go wrong? Bishop takes e6 was quite an inaccuracy because my opponent forgot about the pawn being pinned on d5 and not being able to take the rook back. But nevertheless, this position is winning for White. But playing on seconds is very hard. Bishop to d4 is quite a serious mistake because it gives me a possibility to win the central pawn back. Queen to c2. And here, for the well, not really for the first time, but for quite some time in the game, I have an advantage. Quite a serious one. I played queen to g7, setting up a deadly trap, which my opponent fell into. He played knight e6, who wouldn't, but this move loses by force, and I was able to find this winning continuation, forcing my opponent into a winning pawn's endgame. You can see that I'm getting a queen, I'm promoting my pawn into a queen, and after these exchanges, my king is just in time to stop his pawns, and my opponent resigns. Because my pawns are just way too strong. I'm gonna win his pawns and will promote one of my pawns into a queen. Well, I must say that I was very lucky in this game. Of course, I was very lucky. But at the same time, my opponent was lucky in the first game. So it was a very interesting match with two exciting games. And I hope that you enjoyed these games as much as I did.